Ultra Diner.
Hi, how you doing? Would you like some coffee?
Hello everyone, welcome to the Ultra Diner. This is a podcast related to having a sit down with folks in the Ultra community about anything they want to. The idea here is that the diner is set up, people come in, people have a seat, and talk about stuff. Basic, really simple, and the hope is that we get to learn by example, hear wonderful, interesting stories out on the trail, out on the road, wherever the adventure is or was or going to be, and things that the guest wants to talk about that all tie in to who they are and allows them to be who they are and to do the things that they need to do to be their own flavor of being a person who does ultra events and ultra adventures. How does that sound? A little bit about myself. My name is Ruel and I am not an elite athlete whatsoever, but I am what you would call, or what I would call, a novice runner who is still trying to grow in the ultra distance. And before I move on, what I hope to do is never make this podcast about me. I have another podcast. This is not my first podcast. I have another podcast where I have a lot of opportunity to talk about me. So this is about the diner, and this is about the friends that we will learn about along the way who happen to do things that I will call and feel to be awesome. And I hope you do too. So a little bit about me. As a novice runner, I am my current challenges are the 50K trail. I've completed 2 50K trail events, and I'm not new to the 50K distance. Prior to participating in trail events, I ran solo missions or solo runs out of my door, and nothing with great elevation and technical terrain, but I would challenge myself to try and cover the 50K distance, and over a period of time tried to increase that mileage, and had 2 failed attempts at 50 miles and just stopped short at around 40 miles. And then here I am trying my hand at being better at a 50K trail events. The trail events are new to me, so it's fun. It's a good challenge. 50K is still personally a significant distance for me, and adding elevation and technical terrain and cutoffs make it even more challenging for me. And that's where I am. I do operate on a sort of a fat adapted way of fueling and living, so that that's kind of my thing. And I do enjoy podcasting. I do enjoy learning about what it can take to complete an event, a distance, a race, a challenge beyond the mileage. Yeah, I am curious to find out about things like overcoming the most difficult part of something, right? I am interested to find out if people have fears when they set out to do these things, and if they do have fears, what still gets them out there? A lot of things I want to find out. And obviously, as the podcast grows, the questions become more interesting. I hope, and I hope that to learn more about folks other than their life on the trail. As we can imagine, who we are as people, our experiences, our relationships, our careers, our jobs, or our businesses, interplay with our ability to do so many things, not just the running. For example, for me, and a lot of people, the ability to train is often secondary to taking care of the house, the family, the job. So if you look at a typical, let's call it a half marathon or a marathon training plan, the typical training plan that you could just find on the internet would have your week scheduled out with your long runs, typically on a weekend, where the mileage increases, week by week till you get to a certain point where you appropriately should taper, right? But that's all well and good, and that just serves as a template. What those plans typically don't take into consideration are the fact that, you have one child, 2 kids, 3, and they go to school and they have, activities they need to get to, and maybe your job prevents you from getting to point A to point B at a certain time in order to get a run in, so you sort of have to make do. And sometimes there are going to be days based on that, and maybe even weather, where you can't go out. You can't do a run that you would like to, so, you'd have to figure out an alternative, tweak things, So, basically want to have an open conversation in a specific amount of time and make friends along the way, hopefully. And I hope you guys stick around, and I hope you guys buy into this concept of the Ultra Diner. And some of you folks might wonder why the Ultra Diner. I'm a fan of podcasts like the Ultra Runner podcast. As a matter of fact, it's a podcast that got me interested in doing ultra distances, and I'm a big fan, and I continue to listen. And this podcast by no means is any sort of competition to what the Ultra Runner podcast has accomplished and continues to do. I'm a fan of the Endurance Planet podcast. See, the Endurance Planet podcast is covers ultra running and triathlon and other things. I'm also a fan of Marathon Training Academy. As a matter of fact, it was that podcast, the Marathon Training Academy, that got me interested to tackle that 26.2 distance. And so those are podcasts that I am fans of, and the hope with the Ultra Diner podcast is to come across as none of those podcasts, because it's not an ultra universe, it's not an ultra planet, it's just basically something that's down to earth. It's just a diner. And I'm a big coffee fan, and what do you do when you hang out at a diner is you have something to sip on, and for me that would be a cup of coffee. I like the down to earth vibe. I like the idea that you can just go to a diner and meet up with somebody and just have some small chat. So, it's that sort of setting, it's that sort of vibe that I hope to come across at the Ultra Diner, and look forward to having a bunch of conversations with folks, meeting up with folks, if you will, the virtual meetup, and because it will be a down-to-earth vibe and setting, it's not going to be a typical interview type stuff when we have that opportunity to meet folks at this diner. It isn't going to be a standard set of questions. There may be some common things brought up, but then the hope is that it would just kind of flow and go from there. Obviously, we're going to want to know common things like, what folks, how folks got into doing what they do. And again, when I mentioned, I want to find out things like, what are their fears and most difficult times and overcoming those things. Those are sort of common themes, but they won't be presented and they won't be brought up in a way that is, cookie cutter interview. And, it is my hope to have a co-host on the show. I've been talking to a friend, Tony Portera, who is a veteran in the ultra sport, in the ultra running world. And depending on, schedule, obviously, we should be able to make that happen. I don't know why I said it that way, but we should be able to make that happen. And whether that be on a regular basis or not, I like to think that, this podcast can be a home to Tony and many others in the community. And the podcast isn't going to be limited to runners. It's anybody who has ties to the community and the diner. So yeah, should be a lot of fun. I'm really excited. It's been a long time. The name, the Ultra Diner, is actually the concept was brought up, and I bounced ideas off with Tony Portera, and I needed his feedback to see how he felt about what this thing should be called, and here we are, the Ultra Diner, baby. So that's where this episode is going to leave off, and I'm looking forward to the next episode. I hope you are too. So, signing off, this is Ruel Abadan.
This is the Ultra Diner.
This is another Coffee with Heavy Cream production.